She asked for you every day." That's what the nurse said. It was 11:47 at night. October 14th. I was standing in my kitchen in my socks, and those 6 words just stopped everything. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I just stood there next to the refrigerator with the light humming, and I couldn't make myself move. By the end of this story, you'll understand why those 6 words are the ones I'll carry for the rest of my life. But let me take you back to where this all began. My mother's name was Dorothy. Dorothy May Callahan, but everyone who loved her called her Dot. She was 74 years old. 5'3", the kind of woman who ironed her pillowcases and never left the house without lipstick, not even to walk to the mailbox and back. She raised me alone. My dad left when I was 6. She never really talked about it. She never broke down in front of me. She never asked for help from anyone. She just kept going, the way certain women from that generation were trained to do, like stopping was something that happened to other people. We weren't a dramatic family. We weren't really huggers, but we had our thing. Sunday phone calls, birthday cards that always arrived 2 days early. She'd clip out recipes she thought I'd like, from magazines, from newspapers, and she'd mail them to me in plain white envelopes with nothing else inside. Just the clipping. No note, like the recipe said everything she meant. I'm her only child, which means I was her whole family. She stayed in the house I grew up in for 3 years after she retired. Then her hip went in the fall of 2021. She slipped getting out of the shower, and she lay there on the bathroom floor for almost an hour before she got herself up. She called me 2 days later. Not that night. 2 days later. She said she didn't want to bother me. That was who she was. I drove 4 hours to help her settle into Meadow Pines assisted living in Cartersville. It was a good place. Clean, well-staffed, a little courtyard with clay pots of flowers out back. Her room was private. It cost $3,400 a month, and I paid half. She paid the other half from the savings she'd kept quietly for 20 years, without ever mentioning them. She said the room was fine. She said the food was decent. She said she was adjusting. She always said everything was fine. At first, I came every other weekend, then once a month. Then things got busy. Kevin's mother had health problems of her own. Work got complicated. The holidays came and went, and somehow it was spring, and then summer, and I kept telling myself I would go soon. I called every Sunday morning. She always picked up on the second ring. She'd say, "Hi, sweetheart." Same voice. Warm, steady. She'd ask about my job, ask about Kevin, tell me about a woman down the hall named Helen Marsh, who grew roses in the courtyard and brought her tea on Tuesday mornings. She never asked me to come more often. She never said she missed me. I thought that meant she was okay. That was the first thing I got wrong about my mother. I went to see her on September 2nd, Labor Day weekend. That was the last time I saw her in person. I remember the date because traffic on the 75 was bad both ways, and I almost talked myself out of going. Something about Kevin's plans and a work thing I'd been thinking about. I'm not proud of that. When I pulled into Meadow Pines, she was already out in the courtyard with Helen Marsh. Helen was the kind of woman you trust immediately. Sturdy, direct, warm eyes. She'd been living across the hall from Mom for almost a year, and she'd made a quiet habit of checking in on her. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. That's the first thing I noticed. Her wrists looked thinner inside her cardigan. She'd always kept her hair set at the little salon down the hall on Thursdays, but that day, it looked like it had been a couple of weeks. Her cardigan was buttoned one button off, and she hadn't noticed. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to embarrass her, but she was genuinely, visibly happy to see me. Not in the polite way, in a real way, Before I even sat down, she reached out and took my hand. My mother didn't hold hands. It caught me completely off guard. Helen excused herself after a few minutes to give us some space, but before she left, she looked at me, not rudely, not with any hostility, just a long, quiet, assessing look, like she was deciding whether or not to say something. I noticed it. I let it go. Mom and I had lunch in the dining room. She ate maybe half her chicken sandwich and said she'd had a large breakfast. I believed her. I talked about work, and she listened the way she always listened, carefully, remembering everything, asking follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned weeks before. She always paid attention that way, more attention than I ever gave her credit for. At one point, she started to say something. She opened her mouth, looked right at me, and then stopped. And then she just said, "I'm so glad you came." That was it. I thought it was sweet. I smiled and said I was glad too. I didn't hear what was underneath it. When I left at 4 o'clock, she walked me to the lobby door. She held on at the hug, just a little longer than usual. I told her I'd be back in a few weeks. She said, "I know you're busy, sweetheart. Don't worry about me." I drove home, thinking she seemed fine. She seemed like herself. I didn't go back for 6 weeks. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, is that she asked the nurse about me the very next morning. And every single morning after that. October came fast. Kevin's work schedule got difficult. I had a major deadline at the end of the month. I kept telling myself I'd go after things settled down. After the deadline, after the weekend, after. Our Sunday calls continued. She always answered on the second ring. Always said hi, sweetheart. I'd ask, "How are you feeling, Mom?" She'd say, "I'm fine, a little tired, but you know me, I don't sit still." And I believed her, every time, without ever asking a follow-up question. On October 5th, the call was shorter than usual. She said she'd been resting more lately, said the cold weather made her joints ache. She asked about Kevin's mother. She asked if I was eating enough. She always asked if I was eating enough. That call was 11 minutes long. I know because I checked my phone afterward. I sent her $200 extra through the facility's account system that week. For extras, for anything she needed that I wasn't thinking of. I told myself I was taking care of her. I told myself I was a good daughter. I didn't stop to think that what she actually needed had nothing to do with money. Then on October 9th, Aunt Patrice called. Patrice is my mother's older sister. They weren't close the way people imagine sisters being close. No weekly dinners, no inside jokes. But they talked. Patrice didn't call me often, maybe twice a year. So when her name showed up on my screen that Thursday morning, I felt something shift before I even answered. She opened with, "Have you been out to see your mother lately?" I told her I'd been there September 2nd. There was a pause, and then she said, "Linda, that was 5 weeks ago." I felt myself get a little defensive. I explained the deadline, Kevin's mom, everything on my plate, all the true things that were also, I now understand, excuses. Patrice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your mother would never ask you to come. You know that. She'd rather quietly disappear than ask anyone for a single thing." I said, "I know. I'll get out there soon, I promise." She said, "Okay." Just that. Okay. But in a tone that sat wrong with me for the rest of the day. I called Meadow Pines the next morning, asked the front desk coordinator how my mother was doing. The woman checked something and said, "Mrs. Callahan has been a little under the weather, but the nursing staff is keeping a close eye on her." Under the weather? I told Kevin I'd try to get to Cartersville the following weekend. He said that sounded good. The following weekend came and went. I never made it, and I didn't find out until much later that on October 9th, the exact day Patrice called me. My mother had already been moved to the medical wing.
I found that out from Carol. Carol Simmons was the night nurse who called me on October 14th. She'd worked at Meadow Pines for 11 years. She knew my mother in the real way, not just charts and vitals, but who she actually was. What Carol told me, when I finally sat across from her the next day, was that my mother had made the staff promise not to contact her family. She'd said she didn't want to cause alarm. She'd said, and Carol repeated this to me word for word, she said, "Linda has enough on her plate." That sentence. She has enough on her plate. Mom had experienced a minor cardiac episode in late September. 3 days after I left on Labor Day. She told no one in the family. She signed paperwork authorizing the facility to manage her care and to honor her explicit request for privacy regarding her condition. She was 74 years old and she made a legal decision to protect me from worrying about her. When Carol explained all of this to me, I couldn't breathe properly. I kept nodding like I was following, but all I could think was, she was in the medical wing. She was there for 5 days. I was 2 hours away. 2 hours. She didn't call me. I went to collect her things on October 15th. I was barely through the door of her room when Helen Marsh knocked and stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red. She had her hands folded in front of her like she was keeping herself together by holding on. She said, "She talked about you every single day." "Did you know that?" "Every day." I couldn't answer. Helen said, "She'd tell me something you said on the phone Sunday and she'd smile about it like it was the best thing she'd heard all week. She was so proud of you. She was proud of everything about you." I sat down on the edge of my mother's bed. Helen said, "She never would have called you herself, you know. That just wasn't in her. She thought love meant not asking." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded. Helen left me alone in the room. And I sat there in the quiet and I thought about every Sunday call. Every time I asked how she was and accepted fine without asking a single follow-up. Every time I hung up after 20 minutes because I had things to do. She was in that medical wing for 5 days. 5 full days. I could have driven there in 2 hours flat. She never once reached for the phone. And I hadn't even noticed I'd stopped reaching for it either. I stayed in that room for a long time after Helen left. It was small but she had made it entirely hers. A framed photo of the two of us on the nightstand, I think it was 2014, some family thing I barely remember, her in a blue dress, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. A ceramic mug from home, cobalt blue, the handle slightly chipped. A small stack of library books she'd probably never get through. A tube of her particular brand of hand cream on the windowsill, the same brand she'd used my whole life. And next to her reading glasses, a blue spiral notebook. The cheap dollar store kind with the thin cardboard cover. The corner was worn down soft, like she'd picked it up and set it back down 100 times. I almost didn't open it. But I did. She'd been writing in it since August. Short entries. Sometimes just a sentence. The handwriting was careful at first and then got shakier as the pages went on. August 12th, Linda called today. She sounds tired. I didn't tell her about my appointment. I didn't want her to worry. August 29th, couldn't sleep again. Thinking about calling Linda but it's late and she needs her rest. September 2nd, Linda came today. She looks thin. She works too hard. I held her hand and I didn't say any of the things I meant to say. I kept trying to find the words and I just couldn't. I don't want to be the reason she worries. I don't want to be a burden. September 21st, they moved me to the medical wing today. I asked Carol not to call Linda. I know that might not be the right decision. But I cannot be the thing that breaks her heart. Not yet. Maybe not ever. October 7th, I asked Carol if Linda had called. She said not since Sunday. I know she's busy. I know she is. October 11th, I asked for Linda again today. I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep asking. I just miss the sound of her voice. I had to put the notebook down. I sat on the floor right there beside her bed because I didn't have the legs to stay standing. Aunt Patrice arrived about 20 minutes later. She'd driven down that morning. She found me on the floor with the notebook in my lap and she just came and sat beside me. Right there on the floor. She didn't say anything at first. Then she said, quietly, she made me promise not to call you. She said you'd drop everything and she didn't want that. I told her, she should have let me drop everything. Patrice said, I know. But that was your mother, Linda. She loved you more than she loved herself. And she never once understood that was exactly the problem. I read that entry again in my head. October 11th. I asked for Linda again today. I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep asking. She was apologizing. In her own private notebook. For missing me. That's what broke me all the way open. Carol came to find me about an hour after that. She'd heard I was in the building and she wanted to give me something in person. She stood in the doorway holding a small sealed envelope. My name on the front in my mother's handwriting, careful, deliberate letters, slightly uneven. Carol said, she gave me this on October 12th. She was very specific. She said, and I want you to hear exactly what she said, give this to Linda after. Not before. I don't want her to rush. I couldn't find words. Carol said, I've been doing this work for 11 years. I've sat with a lot of people at the end of their lives. Your mother was one of the most quietly dignified people I have ever had the honor of caring for. She paused. Then she said, she never complained. Not about the pain. Not about being alone. Not once. She set the envelope on the bed beside me and left us. I sat with it for a long time before I opened it. It was one page. Her handwriting, slower than usual but controlled. Like she'd worked on it. It said, Linda. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for the shock of that. I've been trying to figure out how to write this letter for weeks. I kept starting and stopping. I don't want this to make you feel guilty. That's not why I'm writing it. I want you to know I had a good life. A real one. And you were the best part of it. You always were. I know I wasn't easy to read. I know I said I'm fine too many times. I know that made it easy for you not to worry. I chose that. I always chose that. I thought that was what love looked like, not adding to your weight. What I didn't choose was how much I missed you. I want you to know that I asked for you. Not because I needed anything. Not because I was angry. Just because I wanted to see your face one more time. I kept thinking you'd come. I kept picturing you walking through that door. I kept listening for your voice. But I also know you didn't know. And I need you to understand, that was my fault, not yours. I should have said, come. Please come. I need to see you. I never once said that. Not in my whole life. I didn't know how to say it without feeling like I was asking for too much. I love you. I have always loved you more than I ever found the words to say. Don't let this be the thing that ruins you. Let it be the thing that teaches you to say what I never could. Say it to the people you love while there's still time to hear it back. Mom. I sat on the floor of her room and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was small. Not the kind that looks like anything. The kind that's completely silent and comes from somewhere so deep inside you that it has no sound. Patrice came back in and didn't try to fix a single thing. She just put her hand on my shoulder and stayed. A little while later, Helen appeared in the doorway again. She was holding the blue ceramic mug, the one from home, the chipped one. She said, "She wanted you to have this. She told me that last week." She was very specific about it. She set it on the bed beside me and left without another word. I held that mug for a long time. It still faintly smelled like her tea. And I kept thinking, she wrote me a letter so I wouldn't feel guilty. She dictated the terms of her own death to protect me from rushing. Even at the very end, she was thinking about my weight and not her own. I've thought about that notebook every single day since October 14th. Not the letter. The notebook. Because the letter was intentional. She composed that. She meant every word and she chose what went in it. But the notebook was just hers. Those entries weren't for anyone. She wasn't building toward anything. She was just writing down what she couldn't say out loud, the way some people pace, or cry in the shower, or talk to themselves in the car. She had the words. That's the thing that undoes me every single time. She knew exactly what she felt. She knew she missed me. She knew she wanted me there. She wrote it plainly on September 2nd. I held her hand and I didn't say any of the things I meant to say. She had the words. She just couldn't make herself use them. Because asking felt like burdening. Because needing felt like weakness. Because she had been the woman who doesn't ask for a single thing for so long that she didn't know how to stop, even lying in the medical wing. Even at the end of her life. I started seeing a grief counselor a few months later. Her name is Dr. Renee Wallace. In our second session, she said something I've carried since. She said, "The people who love you most are often the hardest ones to reach. Not because they don't need you, but because they need you so much they can't bear to ask." I think about that every Sunday now. That empty second ring on a Sunday morning. I think about my mother telling the nurses I have enough on my plate. I think about her lying in that small room, asking Carol every morning, quietly, "Has Linda called?" And not calling me herself. The thing she never said, the real thing, the one that was underneath everything, underneath every fine and every "I'm just tired" and every "don't worry about me," was just 3 words. Please come home. 3 words she could not get out in 74 years of living. And I was 2 hours away the entire time. I never knew I was waiting for a call I was the one who needed to make.
Some people never say the most important thing, not because they don't feel it, but because they loved you so much that asking felt like taking something away from you. And by the time you understand that, the line just rings and rings.